have no fleet. No chance.
You made one mistake. You thought we needed a fleet.
The colony of Vashir's End had no military base, no fleet, no orbital defense grid. What it had was 43,000 civilians, 3 grain silos, and a woman named Commander Sera Voss standing at the edge of a wheat field, watching the sky crack open. She was not tall. She was not imposing. She wore a faded jacket with a colony patch on the shoulder and boots that had walked more kilometers than any soldier twice her age. Her hair was gray at the temples. Her hands were steady. Behind her, the evacuation sirens had already stopped. Not because everyone was safe, because everyone who was going to leave had left. The remaining 12,000 couldn't. The shuttles were gone. The roads to the southern bunkers were already cut off by the Vrek advanced ships that had landed 3 hours ago, silent as falling ash. The Vrek had chosen Vashir's End specifically, not for its resources, not for its strategic value. The Vrek Council had chosen it because it was undefended, because the message it would send to the rest of the Terran colonies was worth more to them than any fleet engagement. They wanted humanity to watch. Sera knew this. She had read the intercepted transmission herself, sitting at a metal desk in a prefabricated command room with a cold cup of coffee and no backup coming. She had read it, set it down, finished her coffee. Then she had walked out to the wheat field, stood in the early morning light, and started making calls. Not to command, not to Earth, to them, every one of them, the miners, the farmers, the engineers who had built this colony out of rock and stubbornness and sheer refusal to quit. She spoke to them like they were already heroes, because she believed they were. The lead Vrek warship descended at dawn. It came low, deliberately low, skimming the atmosphere so the sonic displacement alone would shatter windows and buckle rooftops. The Vrek called this the announcement. It was a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. They had used it on 16 colonies before Vashir's End. Every single one had broken before a single soldier stepped off a ship. The ground shook. The wheat bent flat. Children screamed in the bunkers below. The ship was enormous, longer than the colony's main settlement strip, plated in black-gray alloy that absorbed light like a bruise in the sky. Beneath its hull, speaker arrays activated, and the Vrek warlord's voice came down like a thunderstorm given language. Humans of Vashir's End. The words weren't translated. The Vrek broadcast directly in the Terran Standard dialect because they had learned it perfectly to make sure nothing was lost in the fear they intended to deliver. You have no fleet. You have no weapons that concern us. You have been abandoned by your civilization. Surrender your colony codes and open your central gate, and your people will be processed with efficiency. Processed, not protected, not spared. Processed. Sera stood at the center of the main square. Alone. No armor. No weapon visible. Around her, in windows, on rooftops, in doorways, 12,000 colonists watched her. The Vrek landing ramp descended. Warlord Grethak stepped out, 7 feet of plated muscle and command authority, flanked by 40 soldiers, weapons hot. He had done this 16 times. He knew exactly what came next. The human representative would shake, or kneel, or simply say nothing at all. He looked down at the small woman in the faded jacket. He opened his chest cavity, the Vrek's natural amplifier, and he roared. The sound was a weapon. Buildings cracked. Dust rose from the square. Several colonists dropped to their knees from the pressure alone. Sera Voss stood completely still. And then, slowly, she smiled. Grethak saw the smile and felt something he had not felt in 16 campaigns. Uncertainty. Sera raised one hand, not in surrender, and snapped her fingers once. The grain silos detonated. Not on fire. The colonists hadn't packed them with fuel. They had packed them with chaff, specifically calibrated metallic particulate that Vashir's mining engineers had spent the last 72 hours processing from their reserves, sized, weighted, and dispersed in a pattern that the colony's own atmosphere processors now drove upward and outward in a perfect electromagnetic fog bank. Every Vrek ship in the atmosphere went blind simultaneously. Their targeting systems, their communications uplinks, their proximity sensors dead. Not jammed. Saturated. The Vrek had never needed to account for this because no undefended colony had ever fought back this way. You don't build countermeasures against an enemy that isn't supposed to have countermeasures. From beneath every rooftop, the mining rigs rose. Not weapons, but the colony's plasma bore drills, the ones used to cut through Vashir's volcanic rock shelf, were now mounted on the cargo haulers in a line stretching the full perimeter of the square. They had a range of 60 meters. They had a cutting temperature of 4,000 degrees. They had operators who had been awake for 2 straight days, preparing for exactly this moment. Grethak turned. His ships were not responding. His soldiers' armor systems were flickering, recalibrating, screaming errors. He turned back to the woman. She had not moved. "You roared," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. "We built." The plasma bores fired. The Vrek front line collapsed in seconds. Not killed, the colonists had calibrated for shield disruption. Not slaughter, but every soldier hit went down hard, armor fused, weapons silent, utterly neutralized. Grethak himself took a glancing strike that sheared his command antenna clean off his shoulder. In the sky above, the blind warships began to drift, their automated collision systems pulling them back, up, away, out of atmosphere, because without sensor data, they could not safely hold position. The Vrek had come to make an example of Vashir's end. They had not brought enough ships for what they found. The last Vrek ship cleared the upper atmosphere 40 minutes later. There was no chase, no final speech, no triumphant explosion. The ships simply left because the alternative was losing more than a colony world was worth to the Council, and because 17 Vrek soldiers were sitting zip-tied with mining cable in Vashir's main square, which was going to require a diplomatic conversation no warlord wanted to begin. Grethak's retreat call was already being intercepted and broadcast to every colony in the Terra network before his ship hit the dark of space. In the square, someone started clapping, then someone else. Then it was noise, real noise, messy and human and overwhelming. 12,000 people who had decided that if today was their last day, they would spend it fighting, and who were now discovering that it wasn't. Sera stood in the middle of it. She didn't raise her fist. She didn't give a speech. She just looked up at the sky where the ships had been, and she breathed slowly, and she let herself feel it, all of it, for exactly 10 seconds. Then she turned to her deputy. "Get the engineers a hot meal, and don't let them sleep until they've been debriefed. And someone fix the silos. Harvest season doesn't care about warlords." She walked back toward the command room. One colonist, a young boy, called after her. "Commander, weren't you scared?" She paused, looked back over her shoulder. "Of course," she said quietly. "But fear is just the entrance fee. What matters is what you build while you're afraid." She walked inside. The door closed. Above Vashir's end, the sky was perfectly, defiantly clear.